colors, well, they may or may not be easier to measure. At least they won't spill like a liquid will. Sometimes if you wash them up, wipe them up with a wet sponge, though, you get kind of glue. So, but I have got a set of measuring spoons I'm walking over to get. And this is my mom's set of measuring spoons. I have baking powder here. And I am going to get a tiny dish, tiny little clear ramekin cup. And I will use my 1/4 teaspoon to dip into my round can of baking powder. Actually, I think all baking powder comes in round cans. I don't think I've ever noticed. And I use my finger to gently touch across the top of the spoon to make sure my baking powder isn't too much. And then I just pour it into my little ramekin. If you'd like to get a close-up?
Sure.
I don't know.
That's a good idea.
Okay. I'm doing it again. Another 1/4 teaspoon. It's a little rounded, so I'm taking my finger and just gently smoothing it off, bringing it to my ramekin, and pouring it in. Pretty easy.
Yeah.
You don't usually spill. Thing that I try to remember, my edge of my ramekin is touching my round can of baking powder. So there's still a chance of some spilling, but not nearly as much as if they're an inch or two apart or more. So I usually keep what I'm measuring into, if possible, touch the container that's coming out of to prevent some spilling. In a baking powder can, top is about 2 inches. Oh, I don't need a funnel. I just pour my ramekin back. Tiny bit of film that's on the counter. So I'll just wipe that up and we'll move on to the next thing. Last night, my husband and I finished off our gallon pitcher of iced tea. So this morning is my time to make a new one. My daughter picked me up, well actually my granddaughter picked me up this big box of gallon-sized tea bags to make a pitcher of iced tea. So I usually use like 6 or 8 little tea bags, but I had a gallon-sized tea bag. I guess you'd say it's about 4 by 5 inches. And I'm going to drop it into my gallon pitcher, another Tupperware item. And I'm waiting for my tea kettle to boil to start making a pitcher of tea, which will be hopefully cold by mid-afternoon or supper time. Okay, that's that one. Here is my teapot, which we made a pot of jasmine tea a bit earlier. It's now steeped plenty of time. I have 2 saucers with 2 small teacups. Connie and I are getting ready for a tea party. My teapot has a long, angled or bent spout, and sometimes I don't always hold it straight, so it'll start to slop out of the spout, which it did do that while I was talking. And I am filling our cups up and setting it down. Oh, and I got to turn off my tea kettle. Trying to multitask there. This is to make my pitcher of tea. Are we still recording?
Yep.
Okay. I have my gallon pitcher that I put a tea bag in the bottom of it, and I am going to pour. Now, since this pitcher has a very defined rim, no shoulder, no inside rim, I can position the spout of my tea kettle right on the rim and pour fast, slow, whatever. Get a bit of steam coming up on my hand, but it's not bothersome. But when I do have to stop pouring, I move my hand back on the handle so I can make sure I empty the whole kettle. So,
cool.
That's that.
Now we're in Laura's yard, and she showed me her hammock that she got when she was in Nicaragua. When were you there again?
Last summer.
Yeah.
And this is blue and white. And it was handmade. I think they used handmade looms at this particular place. It was rather interesting.
Yeah, it has like decoration down here. Like, how would you describe it?
Maybe it's crochet,
Yeah.
maybe it's macrame. I'm not quite sure. But it's sort of scalloped looking and
That's cool.
different. I'll try to get in it. See if it holds me. Oh,
You can tell me how damp it is.
it's pretty damp. Well, it's not wet. It's just damp. So I'm just sitting on it like a chair, kind of, sort of.
Right.
So, rather than... We're in our backyard, and this is a hammock that Connie showed you in an earlier video, and she is making herself quite comfortable, even though it's a little bit of a drippy, sort of drizzly day.
What we are looking at is above the stove, where there are 3 framed pictures, knickknacks, what do you call those things? Grinder, food grinder? Coffee grinder. Another iron shelf with Mexican knickknacks on it, dolls, and cups. And as I look over the sink, I see grandparent picture and other knickknacks such as frying pans and tea kettles and air pushers and cheese graters made of wrought iron, as well.
Hi, this is a clock that gets a lot of use. You may notice it has no crystal or no face plate over it. It's probably made out of some sort of plaster or molded material. It has 2 faces. The top face is a clock, for which it's about 10 after 10.
But I messed up the hands. I might have.
But it's still fairly accurate,
Yeah.
even though Connie messed up the hands. And the bottom hand points at approximately what the temperature is. The numbers are raised on this bottom one: 40, 60, 80, 100. The bottom at 6 o'clock says 120. Let's hope it never gets hotter than that.
Yeah.
There are tiny lines between the different numbers for it to, like you can say what's 20, 25. Okay, so what else can I tell you about my kitchen? That was my husband, Jim, describing some of the items above our cabinets, which we've accumulated over the years. One picture is a cross stitch, and it says something about grandparents are the oldies with the goodies, and other little signs and other little wrought iron items that he had described, some of them. I have set out some canning jars here because I can a lot, and I use my largest funnel for the purpose of spooning peaches, tomatoes, well, usually not tomatoes, but jellies, jams, apple butter into my canning jar. It fits perfectly into the mouth of a regular mouth canning jar, and the top opening of the funnel is probably about between 4. The top of the funnel, where I would be pouring my liquids or my canned fruits into, is about 4 or 5 inches. Well, 2 things. It helps me hit the target to spoon the hot liquid into, but frequently it keeps me from getting the top rim of the jar sticky. Although I do wipe it off before I put the lids on. I mentioned that a lot of times, I think I mentioned, we go camping and go out to the lake for a day, and we'll put a lot of times of Kool-Aid, tea, juice into bottles. I have right here approximately a 10-ounce, very flexible plastic bottle. It's empty. It was a water bottle. And so I'm going to put my funnel into the top of it, And I have some very, very cold water.
I think just,
It again, so
yep, it's on.
Okay. I'm going to pour cold liquid into this very flexible plastic bottle. And the heel of my hand, well, kind of between the heel and the outer edge of my hand, is touching this bottle. And I will feel the liquid because it is cold. So rather than tapping your finger into the bottle to see how full it is, if you're using a hot or cold liquid, kind of have to be careful using a hot liquid. I one time had a very interesting adventure pouring hot tea into a Coke bottle. The Coke bottle was melting
Oh no.
as I was pouring the tea in. So by melting, it was just sort of shrinking. It was sort of compacting on itself. So it didn't get holes in it,
Yikes.
but it became less than a liter, and it started just water oozing out slowly, compressing. The bottle was compressing or contracting because I poured boiling water into a container that is not meant for
I
boiling
know.
liquids. But yes, if you use a very thin, like a soda bottle or maybe a Powerade, Gatorade bottle, water bottle, and you're pouring a cold liquid into it, something out of your refrigerator, you could touch the outside of the bottle. Of course, if you're pouring really fast, you may, it's like a couple of a second gap time between when the plastic heats or cools down for you to feel it. So you want to be pouring somewhat slowly.
In room temperature liquids, that wouldn't work very
You
well.
can't really feel that, right? So you could thump the side of the bottle with your finger.
Yeah.
Walking over to the bottle, you could thump it, and it would have a different sound depending on how full. You would get used to that if it's something you do on a regular basis. Hi, I have a large jar of Miracle Whip here. Anybody who uses Miracle Whip and mayonnaise, especially if you keep it in the refrigerator, which I think you have to after it's open, it's quite solid. I mean, it isn't a liquid, but I use measuring spoons or sometimes measuring cups to dip and get my required amount. And then you usually have to sort of combination of smooth and press it down a bit to get your required amount of measure of it. Again, a lot of times you don't need exact measures, but this would be for peanut butter, Miracle Whip, maybe some thicker jellies, preserves, and then pour it, or even take your finger to scoop out, because your measuring spoon isn't clean. Here's my container of sugar. I usually pour my bags of sugar and flour into more solid containers. And I have a measuring cup here that's a half a cup. It's sort of a round, it is rounded, so it's almost like a half of a circle. And I'm dipping it into the sugar. It's not quite full, so I'm going to dip again. And now it's over full, so again, take the finger, gently slide it across so that I have my half cup, and then I pour it into my bowl, which I'm actually just pouring it back into the sugar container. I did mention sometimes about using a measuring cup and only filling it half full. Like, let's just say I only needed a quarter cup of sugar. Well, this one being a rounded, I would not use this one, but I would use a measuring cup that's much more angular. I have the much more angular metal measuring cup in my hand. So if I were going to use a quarter cup of sugar or quarter cup of vinegar or anything, there are times that I would take my half cup measuring cup and fill it half full. Since I'm not really good at geometry and, measuring the curve and the angle, I wouldn't do that with a more spherical half round, but I would use it with a cup that's more straight up and down sides to know if I filled it half full that I have a quarter of a cup. And sometimes to just save using 3 or 4 different measuring cups, a lot of times I will do that. And having cooked for enough time, I have a pretty good idea of what half of a half cup equals. So there's that one.
Cool.
Rinse my hands again. Another challenge that people a lot of times come up with when it has to do with transferring liquids, if you have boiled pasta or another item where you have to drain it. My handy dandy kitchen sink, I get a colander. This is an interesting colander for those who can see what I have. It is a yellow colander. It has a handle, just a grasping kind of handle, but the end of the handle, about the last 3/4 of an inch, is quite chewed up, and that's because my kids used to take food out to the dogs, and besides eating the food or whatever, they would drag the colander around thinking it was a toy. But anyway, I put my colander in the sink, and a key thing, make sure the plug is not in the sink. That's a little bit not real great. It's not real great to reach and try to
Yeah. She said it's not good to reach in the sink when there's boiling liquid in there, which is a good point.
Yeah. So, if you have a large pot of pasta to drain, your colander is in the sink, your plug is out of the sink, and you probably are usually using pot holders and pouring your large pan to the best of your ability over the colander. I recommend the sink be clean, not just empty, but clean, because there's a lot of times my pasta doesn't always hit the colander, and I want to be able to pick it up and use it, put it in the colander.
Yep.
So I always make sure my sink has been washed out and rinsed before I'm going to. This also is if you're canning, you're getting ready to can or freeze items, and you have blanched a vegetable, and you need to drain off the water from your green beans or your collard greens or...
Okay.
Hello, my cat Lucky has joined us. Not that she's an authority on much in the kitchen, but she just decided to pop up here. She might be getting ready to jump on Connie's lap, hard to say. Anyway, I wanted to make a couple of comments. I use aprons quite a lot. I probably have about a half a dozen aprons. Each one kind of has an interesting story, something I bought on a trip. A lot of people pick up t-shirts, postcards, mugs, magnets, keychains. The last couple of trips that I've been on have had aprons. When we were in Hawaii, I got a really interesting one that has a ruffle kind of around the top of the apron, which is supposed to represent a lei. So I use them quite a lot. That way I have a really good excuse for wiping my hands on my clothes. And I also wanted to mention that there are a number of adaptive kitchen gadgets that have been developed specifically to help people with low vision. My personal thought is that those are great transitional items for someone to know when a glass is full of liquid, or someone to feel more comfortable cutting with a sharp knife. I really do not use very many of them at all. The good old fingers work for me. I have cut myself, I have burned myself, but I think most people that, you know, if you've been cooking for 20, 30, 40 years, or maybe even only 2 or 3 years, that's not out of the ordinary to have had an accident. And I just want to encourage you, whether you would like to use or investigate some of those gadgets and devices, or whether you want to just try some of the old-fashioned, or whether you want to try some of the lower tech, regular measuring cups, measuring spoons, etc. Don't hesitate to experiment in the kitchen. It's great. It's great fun.
Good advice.